Hello, my name is Carlos Erban, and today I'm going to talk to you about high-speed sync and neutral density filters for speedlights. So this picture that you're seeing in front of you was taken with a 3-stop neutral density filter, and it was 2/50th of a second at 2.8 ISO 100. So you're saying, oh cool, I can just use a neutral density filter with my flash and get this result. Well, the problem is that this wasn't taken with a speedlight, it was taken with a strobe. So today I'm going to talk to you about what are some of the things that you can do with your speedlight and how to get around it. Oh, by the way, this one, same situation. It wasn't a 2.8, but I did use a 3-stop neutral density filter because otherwise the sky would have been completely blown out. In order to get to 2/50th of a second, which is my camera sync speed. In some cases, if some camera sync speed is as low as 1/60th of a second, so that's almost a stop difference. So you may need a 4-stop neutral density filter. So let me talk to you about a test that I did this morning. And basically the test that I did this morning, what I did is the first thing I did was I measured the ambient light. So and this is actually going to be a good tutorial also on how to use the basic of your light meter. So let's see what I did. I measured the ambient light, and by the way, what you do is you basically go so I should have taken a picture of that, but I went all the way to the balcony and put the light meter with the dome up. So that would measure, that's the proper way to measure the ambient light. So when I measure the ambient light, and you see this little sun, this is measuring the ambient light, it told me that at 100 ISO I needed to be at 1,000th of a second shutter speed in order to get to 2.04. okay, so this is slightly below 2.8, so it's somewhere between 2 and 2.8. My lens only goes to 2.8, the one that I was using. So I said, no, that's fine, I can live with a half-stop difference between the ambient light and my flash. So by the way, what I did is I used the softbox, and let me just show you the setting real quick. So this is my camera, I'm pointing, this is my target, and I was using a softbox. And I know this is from last night, but I was basically using this softbox, okay, 45 degrees, and it was actually much closer to the balcony than what I showed there. So then I said, okay, cool, I'm gonna put my light meter for the speed light, and get enough power to get 2.8 at 1,000th of a second. And then I measured the flash and said, cool, I got it. Well, guess what? When I took the shot, this is what happened. It's completely underexposed, and the reason for that is your light meters cannot read high-speed sync. Okay, look how this is completely underexposed. It's underexposed like by 3 stops. It's not even close. As a matter of fact, we can see here how much underexposed it is. See here, it's 2 stops. It's about 2 stops underexposed. Okay. So anyway, well, doesn't matter. Let's see. So anyway, so that's a big issue, right? So how do I get around it? Well, one way to get around it is to use a neutral density filter. I use a 3-stop neutral density filter, and when I use my 3-stop neutral density filter, okay. Oh, sorry, that is is out of focus. I was holding one hand my camera, the other one trying to push the button, because what I typically do is my first button, ISO 1, I leave it the way it was, which is ISO 100, and then ISO 2, whatever I do, the second ISO. So and I'm gonna go through this a little slowly because this is a confusing topic for a lot of people. I was very confused about it at the beginning. What you need to do is your camera, okay, will be at 2.8, okay, in ISO 100. 2.8 ISO 100, 1/25 of a second. Now I was able to get to 1/25 of a second from 1,000 because it's a 3-stop neutral density filter. So if you do the math, half of 1,000 is 500, so that's 1 stop. Half of 500 is 250, so that's 2 stops. Half of 250 is 1/25, so that's 3 stops. But so your camera is looking at the the ambient light and measuring it properly to get to 1/25 of a second. Okay? But your light meter measures the light coming from the flash. So you basically have to almost fool the flash by going 3 stops in the ISO. You can just do the math and go from from 1,000 to 1/25, but the problem with that is it's easier to do it this way because then you know exactly what you're measuring at. So 3 stops of ISO 100, again, half of 100 is 50, that's 1 stop. Half of 50 is 25, that's 2 stops. Half of 25 is 12.5, so it's 12, that's 3 stops. So when I took my shot, and again, my settings, I couldn't get to 2.8 because that was the maximum power I had in my Speedlight, and we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so I know I'm gonna be about a third underexposed. Okay, so I'm already expecting that because 2.8, between 2.8 and between 2 and 2.8, okay, I'm gonna be about a third under a stop. So let's see the result that we got. So I took the shot, and this is the result that I got. Now, if I go up by a third, we can just do it here. 0.33 by a third. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what I expected. So this is 1/3. One third. It was 1/3 underexposed. So I said, okay, so let's see how well this thing does. If then what I noticed is, I was at 1/25, and then I took the shot at 250 a second, but it didn't make that much of a difference. I shouldn't have even left this picture here. So then I said, okay, so then let's try high-speed sync and see what happens. Well, so now I take out the neutral density filter and I go to high-speed sync, and I'm gonna do different tests showing high-speed sync, and you can see going to 500 a second. This is well, let's check the exposure. This is well exposed, so you can handle 500 of a second, no problem. But you know what the problem is? The problem is look at my sky, it's completely blown out. So 500 of a second, I already know that it was 1,000 of a second shutter speed to get my ambient light at 2.8. By the way, it was getting brighter, so even 1,000 of a second was not enough. Okay, so then I went to 1,000 of a second. Look how much the power went down. Okay, because what happens is your high-speed sync, the trade-off is that you lose power. Okay, so actually it's about a third underexposed. Yeah, about it. That's not bad actually. That's pretty good. So even at 1,000 of a second, that's not a problem. But the problem is still blown out my sky. So I needed to go to 2,000 of a second, and at 2,000 of a second you can see that is, let's see how much underexposed it is. Yeah, now I'll bet you that is, let's see, I was gonna say 2 stops is more like 1 1.25 stops. So you see you keep losing more and more power, okay, as you go. And then if we look at our sky here, well, the sky here is not bad. So that's probably the best we can do. I tried another one at 1,600 because I knew it was underexposed. I said, okay, so let's go in the middle and see what happens. Okay, so this one is probably about a stop, which, by the way, a stop you can recover in Lightroom relatively easy. Okay, so that's about a stop. So let's see if I go a stop. Let's see. Yeah, you see my sky now is too blown out. So you know there is this trade-off. So anyway, finally I took my picture. I said, okay, let's do the 1,250 of a second at 2.8. Okay, and now, well, obviously this is not. I'm doing it this way because this is easier to see. I don't want to get exposure. Okay, so this is exactly the same. It's about a little bit over one stop difference. Okay, so that's what you have to deal with when you're on high-speed sync. And you know, I tried different tests, and oh, here what I did is, so if you want to get more power off your flash, okay, you can increase the ISO or go to f4, but then your sky is going to be completely blown out. So then what else can you do? Well, you can zoom your flash. Okay, so zoom the flash. So here I zoomed to 105 millimeters, which is usually the most that most flashes can go, and this one I zoomed to 200, and you can see it didn't make much of a difference. It should have made a difference, but it really didn't. I think also has to do that it was going through a softbox, so that may have something to do with it. But here, okay, so we're talking about oh well, you see here I think 2/3. So it did make a difference. Zooming in all the way, and maybe this was the one at 200 because I see very little difference. 200, you're getting 200 watts out of that SB-910. Okay. So what are some of the conclusions? Okay, Carlos, you told me all the problems. What do I do? So obviously one solution is to get a strobe light because strobe lights are much stronger. But if you're using speed lights, that's not what I recommend. What I recommend is that you get a second speed light. And it doesn't have to be, you know, a super expensive one. You just need more power. You saw it's basically like a stop that you need in power. So you know, let's say you're using Nikon and you're using the SB-900, which is the most powerful one, or the SB-800, which is a little, maybe an SB-800 and a 600, or 900 and a 600, or two 700s, whatever. Unless you want to put the flash right next to the face, which is not something, you know, often you want to do. You can do that, but if you're outdoors, you know, you want to have a little bit of flexibility. So that's why I recommend that you get two flashes. And what I used to do, or well, I still do. Okay, so let me show you. This is the Apollo Westcott that I use, but you know, you can use any softbox you want. What I wanted to show you was this Lastolite bracket. And by the way, Lastolite is not the only one that makes this. Okay, there are other companies that make them and they're less expensive, but you can see you can put 1, 2, 3 flashes. What I used to do is I only had 2 flashes, so I used to put 1 on each side, and with that I would have enough power. The other reason why you need 2 flashes is because if you're shooting at maximum power with your flash all the time, if it's an SB-900, it's going to overheat very quickly. And you know, if it's going to be SB-910, then it's going to take a long time to recycle. You want to, you know, ideally you don't want to go more than half the power when you're doing a shoot, especially if you're doing a lot of shots. So those are my recommendations. You know, use a neutral density filter, get 2 flashes. The only thing I don't like about high-speed sync is that when I'm getting underexposed pictures, I cannot use my light meter, and that really is a pain in the neck. I like to use my light meter, and one of the advantages of neutral density filter is that I can get it to 2/50 of a second, and or let's say somebody has a lower sync speed, you can get it to that low and get a precise reading with your light meter. I know there was a lot of information, but I hope you found this useful.